challenges of COVID, we were able to see over 100% rise in the customer touch points that the different fintechs or companies that participated in the program have been able to do so. So we saw 15 out of over 150 applications. We saw about 15 companies get into the first program, and this is something that we hope that we'll be able to continue to do with helping companies get towards addressing the desires and the goals of people in not only in Zambia but in the region.
And okay, let me just add on to what Zachary said. So one of the things that we're also looking at, especially for the regulatory navigation book, is that something that I was privileged to learn last week was technology is always ahead of the law or regulation or policies. And as such, we were of the belief that by partnering together with the regulators, by partnering together with the BongHive, by partnering together with the FinTechs, we'll be able to bring Zambia, or should I say the Zambian economy, to a level where regulation and innovation are speaking to one another. But this playbook also is actually speaking to the fact that it's supposed to be a living document. It's supposed to be talking to people, especially those who are operating within the FinTech space, whether it's just the FinTech or the tech space itself, to be able to understand where they are, how they can move along, and how they can maneuver. Literally, it is how you can navigate within the regulatory space. So as we move forward, we also continue to believe that this, what we have actually created to get today with the whole ecosystem is still going to be a living document, because we believe that there will be additions to it. Whilst we were having these programs, we were actually hit by COVID-19. As a result, we also have seen an acceleration in terms of how the regulators are actually thinking of how they can incorporate fintechs into this space. We have seen the growth, or should I say the birth of sandboxes. And we have had, I would say that as UNCDF, we have had the privilege where different countries within the sub-Saharan region have actually asked us, how can you help us also create such things that we have actually done in Zambia? So for today, I think as UNCDF, we are very proud to have partnered not only with BongHive, but to have partnered with the fintechs that have been part of the programs, to partner with the regulators that we have actually worked with. And I must say that my regulators here in Zambia, our regulators are absolutely awesome. We bow to, ZICTA, to Bank of Zambia, to SEC, to PIA. We would not have been able to do this without you. So I think from UNCDF's perspective and from our end, Mali, I think you can take the program from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kili. Sorry, I was talking to myself for a minute. Thanks very much, Kili and Simunza, for that overview and a little bit of the history of FinTech4U. I think for those of us who have been with it for a time, it's something that we've become very used to and are very familiar with. But there are many among us who are not so aware of how FinTech4U developed and also what the objectives of it were. So thank you very much for providing us with that insight. Right now, I would like to still stay on with Simunza, but also to invite Samantha Malambo, who is the Policy and Innovation Consultant at UNCDF, to go through the actual regulatory playbook now. They will just give a little bit more insight into the various sections, its contents, and the purpose and the value that we hope our fintechs will derive from this resource. So over to you, Samantha and Simunza.
Thank you, Mali. I just need 1 second while I figure out how to make this. There we go. Okay, there we go. So like Mali mentioned, I think like everyone has mentioned, kind of over the last year, we've been working with fintechs, working with our different regulatory partners to develop the regulatory playbook that is essentially meant to simplify the regulatory navigation process for fintechs, particularly targeting startup fintechs. So we'll just walk through the playbook now. We'll walk through kind of the content available in the playbook. Then I will links within it, just to make it a little bit easier to navigate for anybody who's trying to use. It's meant to be a useful document. So in terms of the content of the playbook itself, I think everybody has mentioned, we really thank our donors, Comic Relief, as well as the different regulators that have worked with us in developing or sense checking the content that is presented in this document. So in terms of the content available in the document itself, it kind of begins with the background as well as an overall summary of what the policy environment in Zambia generally looks like. And what that contains is, am I able to, is everybody, I don't know, Mali, if you can confirm if this is visible enough or if I need to enlarge the view.
You can make it a little bit bigger if you can.
I think I might have to exit full screen mode to do that. Okay.
Yeah, probably.
I think yes, it's in full view, so that'll be fine for now. People can download the full.
Okay, all right, cool. So then I'll just keep speaking to it. So yeah, we looked at kind of the overarching policy environment within Zambia. What are the enabling policies that kind of encourage innovation, from the NFIS to the different policies put in place by the different regulators from Bank of Zambia to ZICTA and so on. Payment digitization has been a big part of pushing innovation forward. So there's a special section on that, as well as different innovation policy recommendations. And this really comes out of the different sessions that we've had with each of our regulators. We've had a kind of one-on-one, or should I say one-to-many regulatory navigation sessions, where each of the regulators has come, spoken to each of the cohorts of the FinTech4U program, and kind of presented both their mandate and the situation with regards to regulation and policy in Zambia as it is. And from that, we kind of also gathered some insights from FinTechs in terms of what are some of the key challenges, the key needs with regards to regulation and policy, and that's presented very briefly in that section there. The first section really talks about digitization at a national level, and that starts with our 7th National Development Plan. I won't go into that in detail. You can download the playbook and really read through it there. We also talk about it from the NFIS, which innovation and digitization and digital tools really is a big part of the National Financial Inclusion Strategy. And that I think informs a lot of the work that you've seen some of our regulators achieve over the last few years. It comes to an end next year, but it really, it prioritizes the policy development of the policy environment. It prioritizes the development of new products that drive financial inclusion, as well as the development of delivery channels that drive financial inclusion. The final section I'll go into before I actually begin navigating in the playbook itself is mapping regulatory navigation. So actually, I'll try and enlarge this a little bit because it kind of gives an overarching picture of all the different areas. Okay, hope it's loaded now. Of all the different areas in which all the different areas of the financial sector, some in which fintechs play in, and some in which they don't, but who the primary regulator for that sector is. So for agency banking, the primary regulator is Bank of Zambia, and it kind of extends to 2 other regulators like SEC, with some regulatory support from Ministry of Finance and ZICTA. And it does that for each area, each subject area, from interoperability and payment systems to anti-money laundering, clearing and settling, customer protection, data protection and privacy, KYC, digital channels, network infrastructure, investment, and then finally microinsurance and pensions. From here then, as you can see, the The playbook is kind of interactive in that it's meant to be a useful document, be very easy to navigate through. I will go through the section on Bank of Zambia, and then the structure of that section is essentially extrapolated to all the different regulators. So for each regulator, we kind of used a similar approach that is highlighting the overall mandate, giving a brief history in terms of their regulatory approach and the development of the particular sector of the particular section of the financial sector that they oversee. Excuse me. And then highlighting very briefly some of the key regulation and licensing acts or bills that would be relevant for a fintech looking to work in the space that Bank of Zambia regulates. So for instance, the overarching one is the Bank of Zambia Act, developed in 1996, Anti-Money Laundering Bill, developed in 2001, as well as the directives that were further developed in 2017, Clearinghouse Rules, the Banking and Financial Services Act, the National Payment Systems Act, which I think for the Zambian market is quite relevant because a lot of our fintechs within the Zambian market still play within kind of that payments interoperability space. So for any fintech kind of looking to play within that space, it's a very relevant piece of legislation. You have the directives that were further developed on electronic money issuance in 2018. And the vision and strategy on the national financial switch, as well as the revision of transaction limits, particularly for KYC, that we saw in 2020. And then the microfinance regulations in 2006. Okay, and for these regulations, through these regulatory initiatives, the Bank of Zambia currently licenses the following operations. You can click on, I won't click on it now, but essentially you can click on this section. Now let's see, there we go. So the operating of a commercial bank, the operating of deposit taking, and so on and so forth. The requirements vary, but they typically contain the following. So a written letter of application, and it essentially details some of the documents, requirements that Bank of Zambia has for obtaining a license, any of the licenses that are listed in the section above. Finally, what we have is kind of a bit of a forward-looking section in terms of just understanding the different priorities that the central bank has within the NFIS, but also just how they're looking at the financial sector based on what is available, based on the information available. And this highlights some of the goals in the National Payment System Vision and Strategy, which is the promoting of an efficient transfer of value in the economy, promoting a cash-light society is a priority, increasing access to electronic payment methods, reducing transaction costs, and increasing the usage of formal remittance channels. In 2020, we saw the relaxation of KYC guidelines, or rather a development of a tiered KYC approach. I think development is the wrong word, expansion of the tiered KYC approach. They were essentially expanded to include higher income brackets. I know the Bank of Zambia spent a significant amount of time also developing agency banking regulations to essentially expand the use of agent networks among both bank and non-bank financial players. And then finally, earlier this year, I think BongHive actually was involved in a session with this. Some of you may have attended it as well. They essentially launched their regulatory sandbox to help drive innovation. And I think that session was quite informative, so I won't dwell on that too much. The final section on that is how the bank typically engages with I'll use FinTechs, but it's not limited to FinTechs, and some of the contacts that you can reach out to within the central bank if you're looking to start your licensing process. And the Bank of Zambia, like most of our regulators, has a pretty open door policy of engagement. Officers are readily available to meet with potential licensees. They walk them through the existing requirements, and they review their application prior to the final submission. And that process is kind of detailed here. So you have your initial consultative meeting or call. You have the period of information exchange or dialogue where you're learning about the different requirements and they're reviewing your application. You have expert advisory throughout the licensing process. So they'll review kind of the documentation that you have prior to your final submission. Then you have your final submission and your formal licensing. And then Bank of Zambia kind of plays that role of continuing to monitor your performance within the financial sector. So that kind of is the structure of each. I'll go back to here, full screen mode. That kind of is the structure of each section. There's a section on the Securities and Exchange Commission, a little bit there on the regulatory sandbox, a section on ZICTA and their licensing requirements, a section on USSD, because that seems to be a very important channel for delivery for FinTechs as well as financial sector incumbents. And then there's a bit of a section on some of the challenges and regulatory opportunities that came out or that were highlighted during some of our interactions with the FinTechs. And I won't go into this in detail, but you can feel free to go through it as you download the playbook. The final section is a proposed code of conduct, and kind of the rationale for this was that FinTechs play across the spectrum. You have some FinTechs whose activities need to be regulated by both Bank of Zambia and the Securities and Exchange Commission, and each of those have a mandate for customer protection, as well as the CCPC has a mandate for customer protection. And it can be quite complicated for a FinTech to approach each of those regulators and understand what the primary customer protection concerns are within each of those regulators. So what a proposed code of conduct does is really just, from a customer protection perspective, highlight some of the key things that kind of spread across all of those regulators. And I should caveat this by saying, or by reminding us that UNCDF is not a regulator. So this is really just a proposal of sorts. We are not a regulator. We have worked with regulators and FinTechs and are kind of trying to bridge the gap between the priorities, needs, and challenges of the two sections. So I won't go into this in detail, but you can feel free to read through it as you download the playbook. I'll go back to the beginning just to highlight how to navigate through the different sections. But the idea essentially of the playbook is that as a FinTech who is starting out in the financial sector, what are some of the things that you need to know? Who is your most relevant regulator? What are their most relevant policies for your different actions? Whether you're in digital lending, you're trying to develop a platform for peer-to-peer lending, or you're developing a payments and interoperability platform. What are some of the things that you need to be aware of? Who can you approach within your respective regulator? And what will that process look like for you? So it's really meant to just simplify that process. There is nothing new that is necessarily presented within this playbook. All this information is available if you approach each of the different regulators. What this playbook tries to do is essentially bring that information into one central location. And the idea is for this to be a live document that is updated and developed as policy develops. I think we all are aware of the fact that policy tends to follow innovation. Innovation will lead and policy will follow with trying to create an enabling environment for that innovation. So the idea is really for this document to be dynamic, be alive, and be able to be updated as and when it's necessary. That really is essentially it. Within the playbook, the idea is you can be able to click on each section. Sorry, mine is taking a little bit longer to load. Navigate back if you need to, and it's really meant to be a dynamic and useful document. So that kind of covers that. I'll hand back over to Mali, I think, or Simunza for the next bit.
Oh, no, thank you very much for that, Samantha. And before we get back to Mali, I just wanted to ask the question around, I think it would be helpful to let people know what the process was to developing this this playbook, what the approach you took was to engaging the startups, the innovators, and the regulators in putting this together.
Sure, thanks, Simunza. In terms of the process, we really just followed the FinTech4U process. A lot of the insights for what we needed in this document kind of came from those sessions where we had regulators come and present their respective mandates, what fintechs need to be aware of in the licensing process. And we also had what I would call regulatory journey mapping sessions with the fintechs, understanding their business models, understanding who is the relevant regulator for their business, or regulator or regulators for their business model, and the different licensing journeys that they might take within the financial sector. Once we had that content, we then sense checked it with each of the regulators. It wasn't in the format that it's in right now, because this is kind of a final document that's been edited and made more presentable by our designers. But sense checked the content that is in the playbooks, because like I mentioned, we are not a regulator, and they would know best what most accurately represents their particular sector. Yeah, and then we're here today with presenting the final document.
Great, yeah. I think in closing, before I hand over to Mali, I think what I would say is what I appreciated about the process taken, and especially your expert approach to getting this done was, I think we recognized very, very early that when it comes to developing new solutions, it's not always people that are experts or domain experts in that area that recognize that there's a challenge there, and recognize that there's an opportunity to at least invent a solution that addresses the challenges. And so, for example, you would expect that people that are playing in fintech would probably come from the financial industry, given their wealth of knowledge, having operated within them. But just within, for example, the FinTech4U cohort, we had Bueno, which is led by a medical doctor. So they work around medical insurance, so not necessarily being insurers themselves, but somebody who has a deep desire for making sure that access to health is democratized, and what stands in the way of people being able to access good health is their ability to pay for good health. And so coming to bring out, how do you create health insurance solutions that make it more affordable for people that may not afford premium solutions to be able to also have access to solutions that are there. So a medical doctor seeking and trying to navigate the financial landscape to find out what solutions could exist and what the regulations are there. Another example, for example, is Onyx Connect, where you've got the asset finance for villagers, if for lack of a better term, that allows villagers to increase their yield and to increase their income by making sure that they can get goods to the market on time, by being able to afford an asset like a bicycle. But how do you use technology to then make sure that they can make payments on time, and that they're able to acquire new goods and able to make sure that that the relationship between the the provider and the customer then continues to play place. So if you've got two people who are coming in who are not necessarily bankers or people who are insurance people or something and so on within the field, a playbook like this becomes very, very important, because it helps to address the gap of knowledge that they have coming into the sector, even as they're developing the solution. It also helps them to also approach the regulators and know who they should be having a conversation with, because now we're finding that technology solutions are straddling across various sectors, where a bank ideally knew that they were, or a microfinance institution ideally knew that they were speaking to the Bank of Zambia. We now have solutions that are speaking to the Bank of Zambia, speaking to the Securities Exchange Commission, and speaking to the ICT regulator, ZICTA, at the same time, because their solution might straddle across all three regulators. So this one playbook, we hope, and this is the beginning, as Samantha said, we hope that it will continue to get updated. Hopefully makes it makes the regulation understandable in bite sizes, that helps them understand who they should be talking to, who they should be having conversations with as they continue to develop solutions. And we're very bullish on the fact that Zambia will create great solutions for the region.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that, Samuza. I think that really was the main motivation for developing this playbook, realizing that you have founders of fintechs who have very specific skill sets, like a medical doctor or an ICT professional, and with the limited resources that they have within their organization, might not be able to hire a dedicated resource for policy or compliance, like a larger bank or a larger financial sector player would. So how do you then essentially just simplify that process and kind of pull back the curtain? Because I think one of the things that we found in our interactions with regulators is that our regulators in Zambia are actually very open and very, what's the word? Yeah, I'll go back to the word open. But when you speak to fintechs, on the other hand, there's this perception that they're not as open, or regulation in Zambia is not as enabling. So how do you then just bridge that gap and ensure that both sides of the spectrum have the same picture? Yeah.
Right, thank you so much, Simunza and Samantha, for that deep dive into the playbook. I think it's quite an exciting document to look at. It certainly presents the information in an accessible format, which I hope will be useful to the audience of the playbook. Speaking of the audience for the playbook, I'd like to ask a couple of our fintechs who participated in the FinTech4U Accelerator Programme to jump on and give us what their impressions are of the playbook. They had sort of a sneak peek at it, an opportunity to view it, and just give us some feedback on what are their impressions of this as a tool and as a resource for an emerging fintech. Is Jessie Himuyanga available just to give us a few thoughts? Jessie is from Digital Pago.
Where is my video?
Hi, Jessie. Good morning.
Good morning.
You had an opportunity to, yeah, sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, so as Mali has said, I'm Jessie from Digital Pago in risk and compliance. So just my thoughts on the playbook. I think it's a very good idea, and I agree that a lot of fintechs don't have readily available information on how to approach regulation and whatnot. So you sort of have to dig and sort of have to find yourself a communication line, so to say, with the regulators. So I think the playbook is a very good idea for startups.
Thanks, Jessie. Is there anything in Digital Pago is not a new fintech in comparison to some of the other ones who are now sort of would be interested in applying for the accelerator program. Without trying to be a little bit, not controversial necessarily, but do you think that there's anything missing or other information that we possibly should put out, maybe not in the playbook itself even, but would there be additional information perhaps that FinTechs might need as they get started on their journey?
I think it would be good to sort of have a list, as you have, as the playbook has already shown, you know, a list of which regulators are important to each fintech. I think that's the most important, because regulators sort of help to deal with certain risks and in a company. Yeah, so it would be good to know, okay, these are the regulators who I need to comply with, so that you don't find yourself wanting, you know, you are charged with something that you didn't even know you had to oblige to. So yeah, I think a list of fintechs and regulators, and also to know, like, fintechs are widely spread, you know, they do different things. And so to know, okay, because we do this, we need to, you know, be regulated by these, and these are the issues that we need to conform to, and stuff like that. So I think that is the only thing that I would think of, really.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We also have Wyson Lungu on the call, and Wyson is from Onyx Connect. Wyson, are you available to? Hi, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. Good morning. How are you? Sorry, I can't put on a video. We just fumigated our office, so we're outside.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So I think I'm very excited with the sandbox, and I think kudos to UNCDF, BongHive, and all the stakeholders, especially the regulators, for coming up with this important innovation. I think trying to get into the fintech space for entrepreneurs, it has been very difficult because information is all over the place. And the sandbox is kind of like a one-stop shop where at least you can have some clear guidance or guidelines on which regulator you need to engage and for what. And then also there was an issue of the statutory payments, like the USSD codes and other things which a lot of fintechs need. I was very happy to see the pricing embedded in there, because that is always something very difficult. So even before you are thinking of doing a fintech business, at least you're already aware what the likely fees are going to be, so you can plan around that. Of course, there's still more work to be done, because I was one of the people that I was advocating where for startups and fintechs, though we have this sandbox, which is great, and I think it's a good roadmap for you to know exactly what to do and who to engage. But I think we need to have some kind of preferential pricing, because even if you are entering into fintech, you have already existing players. So I cannot pay 46,000 for a USSD code, which also a big operator who is already in business can easily afford to pay for it. So those are some of the feedback that we want to see how we can fee arrangements. But otherwise, I think this is a great start, I think, to unlocking great business potential for fintechs. I think I speak for other new players like myself. And it's a huge opportunity also in terms of having to see what other innovations we can be able to do in the fintech space. Like for Onyx, traditionally, we are not a typical fintech company, but because of the opportunities that we have presented ourselves in the rural areas, we have been kind of forced to also have a fintech face, because we know that we are able to provide value add and also being able to grow for us, looking at the business that we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wyson. Yeah, it's really great to get actual live input and feedback, because then we know that we're doing well or we've missed the mark. So it's important to hear from actual users and beneficiaries of a product such as this, or an output such as this. We'll now go into the panel discussion part of our program. And I'd like to introduce the panelists who we have speaking with us today. First on the panel, we have Vanessa Chavula. Vanessa is the ICT Programs Manager at ZICTA. And Vanessa's been in this role since 2015. I'd also ask if the panelists can put on their cameras as we go into this part of the session. Welcome, Vanessa, to the panel. Next, we have Muka Madubeko, who is he has a very long title and I had to make sure I got it right. He is a manager of payment systems oversight in the payment systems department at the Bank of Zambia. Thank you so much, Muka, for joining us this morning.
Thank you,
The third panelist, good morning. Third panelist is Benson Wileli, who is an economist working as an inspector and analyst at the Securities Exchange Commission. And the last panelist, who is not a regulator, well, we have Chisanga Mkasanga from Zanaco, and he serves as a digital transformation specialist. Our panelists will be in discussion with Simunza, who you all have already met today. And I believe we have one additional person who's joining the discussion this morning from the UNCDF team in Uganda, Richard Ndahiro, who will also make contributions to that discussion. I also see, before we start into that, just one little bit of housekeeping. I see that there are a couple hands raised for questions. So is it possible for you all to put your questions in the chat, and we'll address them at the appropriate time, maybe a little bit after the panel discussion, please. Thank you so much. Simunza, over to you.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Mali, and definitely like to welcome the panel to this conversation that we're going to have with regards to the institutions and the environment that we have, and what we could do to make it comfortable or enabling, actually is the word that I want to use, enabling for new innovation that actually addresses challenges to come into play. And so coming from the institutions that you all come from, I'll start off with asking my first question would be, what's the mandate of your, would you kindly introduce your institution, just in case there are people here who don't know who the regulators are or what your institutions do. And then and I know that Chisanga, you're here, and Richard, you're here, and you're not necessarily regulators, but would also love to hear about what it is that your institutions do, but then with particular attention to what's the interaction between your institution. Is there any intentional interaction between your institutions and innovators? So startups, FinTechs, and other players that are building new solutions. And I'll start with Vanessa. Hopefully, then get to Muka, Benson. Then I'd love to hear from Chisanga and Richard as well, with regard with a response to this. And starting with you, Vanessa, because I know that you've taken very clear steps to setting up a program that supports innovators, and would love to hear about that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Simunza. And good morning, everybody. I didn't get to say my good morning during the introduction. And yeah, I am very happy to be here and interacting with all of you. So as a starting point, I'll talk about our mandate as ZICTA, as the ICT sector regulator in Zambia. So ZICTA is mandated to regulate the provision of electronic communication services and products within the ICT sector. So we have a mandate to monitor the performance of the ICT sector, and that is including levels of investment, the availability, the quality, the cost, and the standards of all these different electronic communication services that we have on the market. And more specifically, and this is something that is directly related to what we are doing right now, Section 6 of the ICT Act mandates ZICTA as the ICT sector regulator to promote the research, the development, as well as the usage of new and appropriate technologies within the ICT sector, and generally to promote the manufacturing and production of relevant apparatus. So in order to respond to this important mandate that we have been given as an authority, ZICTA established the ZICTA ICT Innovation Program, as you have rightly put it, Simunza. And this is indeed our flagship initiative that is aimed at providing various developmental support services to ICT-related innovators, to ICT-related startups, digital entrepreneurs, and all of this support is designed to move them closer to becoming, or rather to commercializing and scaling their different digital offerings. And over the years, we have certainly seen a growth in the number of fintech platforms and payment solutions. On the innovation program, we have interacted with quite a number of fintechs, and these have been offering different solutions, payment solutions, money transfer solutions, credit scoring platforms, and things like that. And I must say that this has certainly become a high priority area for us, obviously because of the financial inclusion plans of the country, but also as the ICT sector regulator, we want to promote the emergence of these digital products. I think I might also just add that one of the examples of the fintechs that we have interacted with on the ZICTA Innovation Program that is a success story right now is the Patumba. Patumba is, I'm sure that we've all heard of it. Patumba is a savings and investment platform. It's available on all the 3 mobile network operators. And we recently facilitated their acquisition of a stock brokerage license from Lucy. So you can see that we've certainly been interacting with a lot of fintechs on our program as well. So in a nutshell, that is our mandate as ZICTA and how we interact with startups, innovators, including fintechs. Thank you. Over to you, Simunza.
Great. Thank you very much, Vanessa. Amuka, I'd love to hear from Bank of Zambia.
Thank you, Simunza, and thank you, everyone. And good morning. So my name is Sput Amuka. I'm coming from the Bank of Zambia. And just briefly about the Bank of Zambia. The Bank of Zambia, that's the central bank of the Republic, and our role is derived from the Bank of Zambia Act, the Banking Financial Services Act, and the National Payment Systems Act. And we aim to achieve and maintain price and financial system stability that would foster economic development and ensure that I think we're all able to carry out our activities in the economy, I think in a manner that is enables us to achieve our goals. So some of our functions include, I think on the broader part, is to formulate and implement the monetary and supervisory policies, which are meant to, of course, ensure that there's price and financial system stability. Financial system stability keeps coming in because this is very key, because if the financial system is not stable, then it becomes very difficult for you to conduct your business, to plan your business, and also to move funds between parties. So that's the need for us to have a very stable financial system, which will then facilitate for macroeconomic development. Then for the purpose of our conversation today, I think the area that is of great interest to many in this webinar is to do with what we do, dealing with licensing, supervising and regulating of activities of financial services providers, that is banks, non-banks. And also, we also have the responsibility to promote a safe and efficient payment system and mechanisms in the country. So in so doing also, we have a mandate on ensuring that players in the payment system, within the country, they are also properly regulated, supervised, and overseen. So this again is a function, it's a role and mandate that we draw from the Bank of Zambia National Payment Systems Act. The Act was issued in 2007, and between then and now, we have seen a lot of development. So it's something that we are working on to update it to ensure that it takes into account most of the developments. But in the way the Act was crafted, it has created an enabling powers for the Bank of Zambia to be able to supervise the national payment system, even with other changes that evolve within the sector. And then coming to the question where you asked what is your regulatory authority or your institution is doing in ensuring that they enable FinTechs in the country. So I must mention that from the Bank of Zambia point of view, FinTechs, I think, have come in as good partners in terms of advancing financial inclusion in the country, and also presenting new innovations which are technologically savvy, enabling various payment services. I think, for example, you've seen now mobile money is one activity that we are almost all of us have come accustomed to. So that's part of the FinTech activity which the bank is supporting and as authorized in the market as well. Also, with the FinTechs, we have seen that there's an increase now in terms of partnerships between the banks and the FinTechs to facilitate, I think, more innovations that have enabled new products that have reduced the need for you to even walk into the branch or a bank to be able to access financial services. So you're able now to make your payments away from the comfort zone. Also, you're able to carry out various transactions just over the mobile phone. So the Bank of Zambia is facilitating also to ensure that those innovations are supported and ensure that they're able to create convenience for people who are accessing financial services. So to further prop up the need for more FinTechs in this space, the Bank of Zambia, I think, in the early this quarter, issued what we call regulatory sandbox regulations, which are meant to have players in the FinTech space, those that have got innovative products, they can approach the Bank of Zambia using the guidelines that we have issued to be able to go through a trial process, that trial process will be done in close collaboration with the Bank of Zambia officials that have been assigned to handle the process. So we are keen to have more FinTechs and offer services that are able to advance the service delivery within the market. And our core is that even as we allow for more innovations, our core is to ensure that these innovations, I think, they're able to meet customer needs and also they're able to protect customers as well. I think the issues of data, issues of cybersecurity, all those issues should be able to be addressed in the innovations. They should also, I think, if you recall in most of my earlier conversation on what the Bank of Zambia does, I was talking about financial system stability. So even as we allow more innovations, our aim is to ensure that we maintain the financial system stability. So even the new take-ups should not bring down financial system stability, but enhance financial system stability. So I think as we talk more, I'll speak more on the regulatory sandbox, which is a new innovation that we are using now to capture as many FinTechs as possible who are ready to try their products before they can go to the market. So that's my those are my initial comments. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Then we'll come to the Securities Exchange Commission. We've got Benson Mwileli. So Benson, I would love to hear from your side.
Thank you, Simonza, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So starting with our mandate as the Securities and Exchange Commission, we were established in 1993 after the passing of the Securities Act, Cap 354 of 1993. And essentially, we are the apex regulator for the capital markets in Zambia. And as you may know, the capital markets essentially are the markets where long-term financing is raised and also subsequently traded in the secondary market. So we oversee the process of raising of this capital in terms of registration of securities, but we also then oversee the various entities that play around this space of capital. raising. So for example, if you are a dealer or an investment advisor, or you are a custodian bank or a trustee, or you're operating a collective investment scheme, or you're a transfer agent, just to sort of mention a few of the entities, you would be licensed and monitored and regulated by ourselves as the Securities and Exchange Commission. And amongst some of our primary objectives are really to just reduce systemic risk within the capital markets and ultimately within the Zambian financial sector, and also to ensure that we have a fair and efficient capital markets in which securities can be issued and traded. In terms of our other mandate, quite uniquely, actually, I think you don't see this in many parts of the world, but it's also to spearhead the development of capital markets. So we have a dual mandate of market supervision and also market development, in terms of just being able to promulgate initiatives that are aimed at developing the capital markets within Zambia. So that's another quite important mandate that we play as the SEC. In terms of how we interact with the with FinTechs and with innovators and innovations, I think we try to be as open as we can, and I think the biggest step we took was during the when we issued the new Securities Act number 41 of 2016. I think we built into it a lot of flexibility, which I think didn't have in the past, to help us be able to be more responsive and adapt to the dynamic environment in which we're seeing these fintechs and innovations sort of start coming up. So I think we included a lot of provisions within the new act that enabled us to have a lot of flexibility. And I think you can see that this has culminated into the establishment of the Capital Markets Regulatory Sandbox. I think it's important to mention that we were the first to bring out the regulatory capital markets regulatory sandbox within the financial markets, and because we noticed that technology and innovations played a very critical role in helping be able to improve access and usage of financial products within the financial markets in Zambia. So in December 2020, we came up with a regulatory sandbox in partnership with UNCDF and BongHive. And I must mention that to date, we have 2 entities that have been approved and authorized to participate in the sandbox, and we have 3 others that are pending feedback from ourselves after applying. And so the first cohort is underway, and so far it's been a fantastic experience. I think it's a learning process for both us and the entities that are operating within the sandbox. So I think for a start, I'll leave it there. That's really like the primary initiative that we've launched in order to help us be able to better engage and promote innovation within the capital markets and ultimately within the financial sector in Zambia.
Oh, great. I don't know if Chisanga's still here, but if you are, Chisanga, oh yeah, there you are. Chisanga, I'm keen to hear from your side. So you're a financial institution, Zanaco, you're a financial institution, but what's your keen? We know we've worked with you to support fintechs, so you clearly have an interest in playing with or partnering with rather and supporting fintechs. Why is that something of an interest to you as an institution?
I think, as you said, Zambia National Commercial Bank has a mandate that focuses on driving innovation, and we put in a few initiatives to support fintechs. So just to mention a few, Zanaco has continued to interact with startups, mostly through accelerator programs with yourself as BongHive. We've supported partnerships with similar organizations providing mentorship, financial support for the incubation programs. And we also do receive fintechs in an individual capacity. So I think a bigger picture is we do, as a mandate of the foster innovation. I'll speak more on the innovation lab, but it's essentially an enabling environment to foster innovation in and around the organization. It allows us to create a digital ecosystem as well as making it easier for FinTechs to work with us. So just to speak a bit about the process we go through, we run them through a one-pager if we're not taking them through accelerator program. One-pager, which is essentially a summarized business case, and we work with them for proof of concept. And by doing this, we're addressing some of the bank's pain points and solutioning for mutual benefit. And we essentially use a lean agile operating model. So yeah, just to summarize, we do aim to have this digital ecosystem, and this is inclusive for FinTechs in the financial space and startups. Thanks. Simonza, back to you.
Thank you, Tsanga. And I'll bring in Richard here. I think you've got, hopefully you've got a regional view working with the UNCDF in Uganda. And very keen to hear about what's happening in that space there, briefly what's happening in the space there with regards to what's emerging. I do have some curious questions around licensing, but let's start there for now.
Thanks, Simonza, and everybody on the webinar. It's a pleasure to share a bit about what UNCDF is doing in Uganda and across the region to do with FinTech, but also innovation at large. Just some background. So UNCDF has a mandate of unlocking capital for private and public entities in the LDCs, but specifically we have a program that's called Leaving No One Behind in the Digital Era. Maybe most of you have heard of it. It's the same program delivered currently in Zambia and across other countries in Africa and beyond. That program in a nutshell has 4 key components. One is, so in the quest to sort of get digital to work for those that are left behind, what might be some of the policy and regulatory aspects that need to be worked on at the base of it all? And the work that is bringing us together here that Zambia is doing would actually fall under policy and regulatory interventions. Then we look at, in terms of infrastructure and specifically digital payments ecosystems, what needs to be done there to get those that are left behind to actually also benefit. Beyond the infrastructure, then we get into innovation. How do we get innovation to actually work on the relevant needs of those that are currently left behind? And this is where all our work to do with FinTechs, startups, sits. Then lastly, which is the 4th component, is on the demand side. How do we get the customers to be ready with the skills and the literacy levels to actually take advantage of the digital solutions that are relevant to them? So our work is clear-cut under those 4 key components. Now, in terms of how we work with specifically around FinTech and innovators, which is in our inclusive innovation work stream, is so the approach across all the work streams is the same. In a specific country like Uganda or Zambia, we identify what are the challenges or the obstacles around innovation to work for those that are left behind. And in those challenges, what can we prioritize that is within our means and is priority to be able to unlock the use of digital services? And that forms our to-do list, and we work with local partners, government, private sector to actually unlock those obstacles. So everything you'll see in Zambia being done, in Uganda, across UNCDF countries, will actually follow that approach. In Uganda, for example, we realize there is a very strong need to beef up the innovation space, not just by working with given innovators, but the whole ecosystem at large. So we have a program that we support called Startup Uganda, which is an association of various tech hubs. And the objective is work with these hubs for them to get better at incubating and accelerating startups. And in that way, we shall not be just touching a given solution provider, but the whole ecosystem. And through that, also convene other partners to join hands in growing the ecosystem. Beyond that intervention, we actually are very focused on sectors of agriculture, health, education, and finance, of course, and transportation. Those sectors chosen as the sectors that directly impact the rural people who are left behind. And our quest is, are there any innovations on the market today that need our support to grow, to go to scale and solve specific issues in these areas? So you'll find those of you who are keen on checking out UNCDF websites, you'll see lots of requests for proposals. We're looking for solutions solving challenges in agriculture, in health, in education. And what we do is identify a given partner that we can support scale and work with them to understand how better their solutions can be scaled. That's how we sort of operate in the innovation space. I don't know whether Simunza, you'd like me to go into the trends we see across the region when it comes to fintech, or that can come later.
That's actually my next question. So I think maybe you can kick that off from given your outside of Zambia view, and this is something that I would like also the other participants to go through a quick fire round of what are the trends that we're now starting to see in the sub-Saharan region, Southern Africa, if you're in Zambia, or if you've been interested. We saw 13, 14 years ago, we saw M-Pesa emerge out of Kenya, and mobile money has now become a normal thing for anyone, for most of us on the continent now, to be able to make payments and receive money and to transact. We're now seeing new plays like fractional investments going on in West Africa, which allow people to to invest in American or Western stocks, regardless of the stock exchange. Now, this is a crystal ball with regards to what are the trends that we're now seeing across the continent. And certainly, Richard, it would be great to hear you start that off.
Thanks. And the trends I may mention may be skewed to what the view we take at UNCDF, but I think, but I won't claim to be exhaustive, but I'll give what I see. So one of the trends that I see in the innovation space, and this is also the trend our programming at UNCDF has taken, is initially it was about how do we get a person to have a digital account and transact. But then quickly the question became, it's digital for what? An account for what? And we didn't see a lot of usage of lots of mobile money accounts opened or accounts opened using other things like agency banking. And that brings in the aspect of innovating beyond the account. So use cases that sit on top of the account. So whereas initially it was about payments as the value proposition to the customer, today the value proposition is beyond payments, and it's about what use cases sit on top of the payments. And I remember sitting in a meeting somewhere in Senegal, we had a person from MTN and another person from China. The person from China was saying, for us, payments is a commodity. A person from MTN was like, payments is our value proposition. But that's today also getting eroded, is that a lot of the fees that were being paid just for enabling a payment are going down, and people are more competing around the use cases that sit on top of the payments or what the data from the payments brings. So everything around digital lending, data analytics, and so the value you're able to get from being able to offer payments is what is becoming more and more the value to the user. The other thing we are seeing around payments, of course, initially we had telcos with standard systems, and to plug into them, you had to go through aggregators and middlemen that were enabling the integration. Today, we are seeing a lot of open systems, open APIs, and open innovation as the trend. So telcos and some banks are realizing that we need to make it easy to plug in and play. And because we are not able to provide all the innovations that people need, we're actually not built for that. Let's open it up for innovators, FinTechs, and beyond to actually easily plug in and start offering solutions, and those are win-wins there. Maybe something else to talk about on the regulatory space. We saw at the start of the M-Pesas and in East Africa, first it was indirect regulation, or sort of something of, we don't understand this quite well, let's regulate it through the banking system, or let's test and learn. But today we are seeing now a move towards directly regulating payment service providers and FinTechs by the central banks. And this, you'll see a wave of PSP acts in Uganda. They just launched one, and in other countries where now PSPs, FinTechs, and even the telcos are having to split their mobile money operations to be directly regulated by the central banks. That's another wave, and it comes with lots of implications on how people are able to start their businesses and play. And that's also the sandbox aspect becomes useful, because it's not easy to join and already be ready to comply. We're also seeing a wave of what you'd call startup acts. These are beyond FinTech, but in a number of countries, they're realizing that startups, so high growth businesses, actually require certain types of special incentives for them to thrive. And a couple of countries are actually working on specific startup acts to enable these the startup space to grow. That's another area. I talked of, in the payment space, we're also seeing a lot of what I'd call consolidation. So consolidation here being, so you have a couple of acquisitions and mergers, either by international companies or even across Africa, some merging, because at the end of the day, the value is in being able to provide an open but also interoperable system of payments. And then that's where the value will become. Whereas at the start, you had all these siloed payment systems. Now you're starting to see consolidations and interoperability. And I think the value is in those that are able to offer a multitude of options of payment to the customers. And that's what is enabling a lot of the e-commerce that is starting to grow on the market. Lastly, Simonza, I would like to highlight also the fact that there is a call to action for FinTech and innovation to be more development oriented. Some of you may have read the UN report on digital financing for the SDGs. The call is, yes, FinTech is actually relatively getting mature across Africa, but how do you move from payments to other use cases that are actually more development oriented? For example, I'll tell you in Uganda today, around 78% of the FinTechs offer, to a large extent, just payments. But the question is, how do you go into other areas that would unlock development outcomes? And there is a recognition that digital finance and FinTech actually have the capacity to innovate, to build business models that will help outcomes in agriculture, health, trade, and beyond. And that's where the call to action is today for FinTechs to start looking at how do you enable government to do better public financial sector management? How do you enable better mobilization of savings? And how do you enable the channeling of saving, of lending towards areas that are more development oriented and that will have more impact to the economy? Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I'd like to come to Chisanga, and especially because you're the private player here, and I'd like to say, what's your take on the trends that are now emerging, whether they're coming in from banking, and the talk in the world now is moving towards open banking and similar solutions. Are we there yet? Should we see it in the horizon? But before we get there, are we moving in a different direction, or are other things happening that we should get excited about?
Okay, I think to speak on what we're seeing in this market. We're seeing a lot of shared platforms, a growth of shared platforms in financial institutions.
Would you kindly speak up? There's been a comment on some people not being able to hear you clearly.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we are. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah. So I was saying there's been a growth of shared platforms in the financial institutions, speaking to interoperability. So whether we're going to see a rise of banking as a service in Zambia and open banking, I believe looking at where we're going with the financial switch, I think it'll be easier for banks and fintechs to be able to integrate and work together and provide a level playing ground with the likes of, let's say, shared agency banking, which is being done by our digital fintech, allowing for interoperability when it comes to agency banking. And yeah, so I think there's a few things that we need to get across in terms of regulation before we have a mature banking as a service, and a few cybersecurity risks when it comes to working in the cloud. So I think some banks are only transitioning to moving to cloud-based services, be it their risk tolerance and so on and so forth. But I think it's definitely the way to go, as it provides for easier scalability, and obviously the fintechs are going this route. So I think the banks are also getting more flexible when it comes to which sort of fintechs they work with, because of issues like cloud-based services. So if the banks are also able to move on to such platforms, it'll be an easier discussion when it comes to integrations with such services. Thanks, Gunza.
Thank you, Sanga. Now, coming to the regulators, yeah, what's your view on what are the conversations you're having with your fellow regulators, with what we should be preparing for, what will enable people to have better access to and better management of their finances, better growth, and using digital solutions. I guess it's possibly a wish list that you're looking for. What are the trends you're observing on the region? And I'll start with the Bank of Zambia, Muka, if you would kindly give us your views.
Okay, thank you, Simuza. Great. So I think from the Bank of Zambia point of view, I think what we have seen, I think there's been an increase in the use cases for digital payments now. Because previous what was there was that people used just for payments, moving transfers, just to make a transfer from myself to another person. That's what was common previously. But over time, we have seen now an increase in the use cases for these for these platforms, so digital financial services. Particularly now, you're able to make bill payments. All these are use cases. You don't just need to make a transfer and obtain cash, but instead more e-value is now circulating within the economy to be able to facilitate for transactions and payments. And also what we are looking at, also being part of the national financial strategy and financial inclusion strategy, is now more how can we digitize more of these more of the payments, particularly even government payments. How can we digitize them so that there are more use cases for one having to use the solutions coming from the fintechs, particularly the transfer platforms. And also we are seeing also that what the other bit we are seeing is that with the coming of before the switch and with the coming of the switch, we have seen now an increase in the interoperability of various players, where we have initially we had partnerships amongst players where they were able to make transfers between the banks and non-banks. Now with the coming of the national switch, that process has been made easier, as it has facilitated interoperability between various players. All one needs as a fintech, once approved and met the conditions, you have gotten your license, you can then connect to the national switch. After meeting the conditions of connecting to the national switch, then you're able to make transfers between your customers are able to make transfers between your platform and their platform, and the platforms of our banks. So interoperability is one thing that we're also pushing to ensure that there's more institutions are connected and reduce the need to having to use cash in our as we move around. And similarly, also what we are seeing now in the region as well is that you see most of the institutions are pushing towards having interoperability, because if you see institutions operate in silos, firstly, it stifles innovations. Secondly, the desire for providers to go into the market and innovate more is reduced. But with interoperability, then you have more areas that you can focus on. And the other bit I should also mention is a bit to do with need to, we are seeing also the FinTechs also facilitating for credit as well, credit provision in the market. With the partnerships, we have seen that people can now access credit via arrangements between FinTechs and other regulated entities. The other bit is also handling of remittances. You notice that remittances previously, you'd receive internationally, you'd receive remittances direct from cash to cash. But now these remittances are able to terminate directly into a wallet or an account, which is a good thing to have for purposes of integrity within the financial space. So for us, what we are seeing more is partnerships and increase in interoperability, which is leading to more innovations and having more products that are able to meet customer needs, and also enable players also to grow their businesses as they provide services to our customers. I think those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's certainly exciting to hear how even people or commercial activities are taking advantage of these opportunities in being able to deliver goods and services and still collect money without actual cash being withdrawn from an ATM or exchanging hands. But the full cycle, the full business transaction is still goes on. I'll come to Vanessa. From ZICTA's point of view, where are we going? What's happening? What do we want to become with regards to trends?
Thank you, Simonza. I think for me, it's really just to echo what everybody else has already said. We have certainly seen this acceleration when it comes to fintech innovations and all these payment solutions, money transfer solutions, and these different products and services coming on the market that are trying to make things easier and better, but also incorporate other value-added services as well. So in terms of the trends, I can also say we have certainly seen a lot of these fintechs wanting to collaborate with the banks. They want to collaborate with the industry, supermarket chains, and things like that. As the ICT regulator, we have seen that these fintechs also want to collaborate with the MNOs so that they can also take advantage of the platforms that they already have. Also, interoperability, as everybody else has already alluded to, we have seen that this is something that has become a trend as opposed to how it was in the past, and people working in silos and things like that. Now we have interoperability coming into play, and this has really made it even better for us to access these financial services. I think the biggest success story that I can talk about also here is the mobile money. As you had mentioned, Simonza, if we look at the M-Pesa in Kenya, for example, we have seen how, and even our mobile money, Airtel mobile money and our mobile money platforms in Zambia, we have seen how mobile money platforms have really changed people's lives, and this across all demographics. Today, if I call my grandmother in Shangombo and I ask her what Facebook is, she probably will say, okay, what is that? Of course, she may have an idea, but the idea will be here or there. But if I tell her that, do you have mobile money, or what is mobile money? She will certainly know what that is. So those are the trends I think that we have seen. And certainly, I think that we are heading on the right path as a nation towards digitization and innovation. I think these would be my comments, Simonza. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. And Benson, I guess the hope here is that these innovators, these startups that will grow, and as they grow, they'll need access to more capital to accelerate that growth. And this is the cycle we hope to see with more businesses locally. And you're the regulator in the space where on how that capital will flow towards these companies, but also the opportunities for people to invest through various mechanisms into such opportunities. What are the trends that you're seeing in the region that we should be paying attention to and that provide opportunities?
Thank you, Simonza. In terms of the trends, I'll really just speak to what we've sort of been able to observe within our space and to the interactions that we've had with innovators and fintechs. I think we've noticed that, so in the past decade or so, there's been a drive to try and get the more formal financial services and products get additional usage. But I think a few years back, the market sort of took a step back to sort of think through whether these are the only options that we can explore. And I think there's stemming from that sort of reflection, there's been an increased drive for alternative financing solutions, especially in parts of the world that are developing, like Zambia and the surrounding region. And so that's really where we've seen, I think, a lot of interest coming through. So issues of crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending platforms, for example, that would address exactly what you were talking about in terms of helping SMEs, for example, raise funding, away from maybe the traditional sort of banking system and that sort of thing. But also, while doing that, provide investment options for individuals that have excess money that they are looking to invest. So we've seen a lot of drive in that particular space, but also in terms of I think maybe to answer the other question you had asked about where we see ourselves sort of going as regulators, I think we're just looking to enhance partnerships. I think what we've seen so far, even as we were developing the regulatory sandbox for capital markets, was that partnerships played a very critical role. And I think this is something that we're looking to leverage on, even as we continue. So continued feedback from the various players that we're interacting with, but also partnering with entities like BongHive, for example, like Zanaco, and other fintech hubs that are interacting more directly with these particular innovators that we would like to work with, and hopefully get to channel into our regulatory sandboxes, for example. So I think that's a very big area for us of priority going forward, and in terms of the trends as well, the power of partnerships, and we look to leverage on those.
Thank you very much, everybody, for sharing your opportunities. I think there is also, I've been reminded that there's definitely an opportunity to have the conversation going forward around what this all looks like. So, for example, the playbook that has been released today definitely addresses the knowledge that anybody coming into the sector providing and building a new solution needs to know with regards to the landscape and what they need to operate. There's a very good question there around, could this be done with regards to anybody seeking to expand into the region? Would a playbook exist that helps them to know how to get to? And it's great to see that Zambia is where we are leading and taking the initiative to make it easier for people to get into the market locally and to provide these solutions that would hopefully extend the flow of money a lot, to make it a lot easier, to make transactions a lot easier, and hopefully accelerate the growth of our economy. But also, we also have to acknowledge that within that, the regulators have also set up sandboxes that lets the innovators get closer to them. So ZICTA has a program, for example, their innovation program that allows them to work with 60 innovators in a year, work closely with them, understand what the pain points are, make the introductions to the MNOs, and support them within their journey towards growth. The Securities Exchange Commission has now built out a sandbox that helps them to bring in new ideas, new businesses that regulation or policy regulation may not currently exist for, but at least close enough for them to work out what that should look like, so that there's a playing field that allows them to play, but also a playing field that allows those that entrust their money with these innovators to know that their money is safe, because the risks have been looked at, the risks have been addressed, and the walls have been put into place to make sure that there's some safety there within the transactions that are going on with such an entity, and which is the same thing with the Bank of Zambia. But from private players, we also have to acknowledge that we've got private players that are now coming in and opening up their APIs. We've got MNOs that are setting up, so mobile network operators through their mobile money solutions that are setting up APIs that are now saying that, okay, great, if a store of value is held within a mobile money wallet, how does it move towards the next thing that you want to do? How does it move from your mobile money wallet towards an investment account? How does it move from an investment account into treasury bills? How does it move from treasury bills towards you paying your grandmother to make sure that she, transferring money to your grandmother to make sure that she can buy fertilizer, or your mother to make sure that she can buy fertilizer for the rainy season at the end of the day? And the transparency and making this happen with various players so that you don't have one monolith player trying to do everything, or the super apps that are now coming up, is that you've got various players that makes it healthy and makes it safer for this to all happen is something. So the progress that is being made in Zambia is something that we need to acknowledge, and I think that it would be great to continue to have conversation. And this is my wish list of something that I'm putting out to the UNCDF now. It would be great to have a conversation around what are the models that exist around the world, what are the trends that are happening, and can we deep dive on those conversations around what would open banking look like in a place like Zambia, and what are the things that we need to, what are the advantages of it taking place? Do we need it? Do we not need it? What does eKYC look like? What are the central points that need to be posted up? What are the conversations that we need to have? And what are the things that we can build, to create a place that is healthy, not only for Zambia, but for the region as well. We are like I said, we're very, very confident that Zambia can become a regional player, and not just a regional player, but a regional leader with regards to provision of financial services across the markets in the region, and leading the way in making sure that those happen, and also transactions. And we believe that this could be positively not only impact the region, but the continent as well. And creating that platform for these conversations to happen is one way for us to forge ahead towards what that future we want to get to looks like. With that, I'll hand back to Mali, given time, so that we can address any questions that have come from the audience.
Thank you so much, Simunza, and thank you very much to all of our panelists for all your knowledge and insight into some of the issues that we face around innovation and regulation here in Zambia. It's really interesting that you have sort of pushed us into the region, Simunza. It's a great challenge for UNCDF to consider, but thank you very much for that. There have been a couple questions. I think Simunza's touched on one of them. Chisanga, there's a question directed to you specifically at Zanaco about what kind of fintechs that you all are looking for. Would you like to just respond to that real quick?
Yes, thank you. So just to speak more about that, Zanaco has an open door policy to fintechs. We don't restrict which fintechs we work with. I'll drop the email that you can use to send your concept, and then we can get back to you on the one pager that I spoke about that will address what you're solutioning for, and what the challenge is, and we can then work with you from there. So I think, as I earlier mentioned, the Zanaco Innovation Hub is an enabling environment for innovation, and we do work with fintechs in an individual capacity. So I think that's welcome.
Thanks so much, Chisanga. There have been a few sort of other comments which will be addressed. We're getting close to time, but we will address all the comments and questions that came through. There were a couple that I received directed sort of on the side. This is an interesting question, is how often do we think this playbook needs to be updated? That's a real interesting question. I'm not sure if that has been made explicit, Samantha, in your plans, but I think that is something that we should look at. We know that there is a lot of movement in the market. There's things like fee structures that change all the time. So those sort of updates are definitely needed, and we will address it, I think, as the weeks go by. Also, This is something to consider. I don't know that there's an answer to this yet, but do regulators also need a playbook to act as mediators? So this is a question to all of you regulators, whether this is a playbook for fintechs, but now do you regulators as regulators need a guide as well to sort of facilitate your work? It's just a question. There's no answer that anybody needs to come up with right now, but it might plant a seed somewhere. And that might be something that within your institutions you can consider. This is a question, Muka, directed to you at the Bank of Zambia. This is from Topcat, someone named Topcat. Do I need a license to operate as a payment gateway company?
Okay, so thank you, Maddie. So currently the provisions of the law are that a person offering payment services in the bank, in the country rather, will require regulations. So this includes whoever is, that includes people who are facilitating for clearing or settlement of financial instruments. So this will be clearing, or clearing means you are putting together, I think you are facilitating the movement of funds across different parties. So if you're doing that aspect of facilitating movement of funds across parties within Zambia, then it will require to be regulated. If you're also offering settlement services where you collect funds from different parties and then you set on behalf of different players, a keen I would give off is what maybe a clearing house does. The Zambia Electronic Clearing House does, where they facilitate a collection of checks or electronic funds transfers, then those are transferred to respective players. So if in that work you're connecting various players, then we need you to be regulated. So what I would recommend then is to present your product to the team. I saw you had put through in the playbook, you have put up a few numbers so that we can engage you and look exactly at your product. What is it doing? So that we can then guide you in terms of how you move in terms of applying for a license. Then the other bit to mention also, in addition to the contacts that you provided there, they can also send an inquiry through an email called PSD, that's small letters, psd@boz.zm. Then we'll be able to give further guidance after looking at the product.
Thank you, Muka. I think your response and Vanessa's contribution, Benson's contribution has shown how that open door policy really is true. As regulators, you are very welcome to the fintechs and the public. And I think that's really great for the kind of market that we're trying to expand and develop. We're coming very close to the end of our session this morning. I would like to thank everyone for their participation. It seems as if we held pretty solid at most of the participants. Very few people dropped off, which might be because it was such an engaging and enlightening experience. So thank you all for staying with us this morning. I specifically would like to thank Simunza Muyangana for his contribution in guiding us through the program this morning and also facilitating the discussion. It was great to hear from all the regulators, about what their role is and how they view innovation and where they think innovation is going in Zambia. It's really great to know that this is something that they've taken a hold of and are continuing to move with the market, which is very insightful or it's encouraging for where we want to go. This morning, we also heard from a couple of fintechs. After Samantha took us through the playbook, we heard from a couple of fintechs on how they thought this resource was for them. And it was taken as a good introduction in the beginning. And I think that it's definitely the way that we'd like to go. So thank you very much to those fintechs for providing their input and feedback. Feel free to share this among your colleagues, among your peers, even within your own startups. So the information is accessible and available to everyone. This is something that we're developing for all. So please don't hold on to the information, share it as widely as possible, because we'd like fintechs to be prepared when they enter the market, and we want to help them succeed. So it's not a question of limiting the products and services that are available. We want to see as many people access as many digital solutions that can improve their lives and uplift them. So thank you all very much for your contribution on that. We heard from Richard about some of the trends that are coming out of Uganda, which speak to some of where some African countries are going. And I think some of those things around open APIs and fintechs becoming a little bit more development orientated are going, which is great. It shows that as a region, we're all sort of heading in the same direction. There are some who are a little bit further ahead, but I think it's a really good way to grow. We also, we heard from the regulators, which is the most important part, and we're really grateful for everyone's participation. I see that there's one more question that's come through. Are either Benson or Muka, would you be able to take this question that's just popped up? Based on the interoperability aspect, this is from Henry, in fintech and payments such as e-wallet, is there any progress or plans to implement an open ledger technologies to leverage the value of various e-wallets provided by fintech? Now, we will be compiling a list of responses to share to all participants. So that will be available if you can't take the question now.
Okay, so thank you. Maybe just to give you a comment there. So I think from the Bank of Zambia point of view, being a regulator in the financial space, our role is to enable, I think, various innovations in the country. So if there is if one player feels they're able to deliver on this technology or the product, we are ready to learn more in terms of what do you want to do, and so that we can see the risks that the risks and being addressed accordingly. How safe is this product that is being offered? So we enable, for our role is to enable institutions to be able to innovate and be able to deliver on their goals. So the Bank of Zambia will not come and start developing a new product on behalf of our players, but they will facilitate for players to be able to develop products that will be able to meet customers' goals. Our role is to create an enabling environment that will enable various players to have a role to play in the market and enable, I think, financial system stability and integrity in the financial system, and also help to ensure that customers are happy with delivery of our services. And then the other one also, I noticed there's also a question from Chisanga who talked about potential of having an eKYC in the eKYC platform, that electronic know your customer platform. And this is something that the Bank of Zambia is also considering in its strategy to have a centralized KYC for the financial sector, and hoping that this facility can also be linked to the main registry that the government will come up with. So it's something that the bank is also considering in order to improve onboarding process, particularly that we are now going digital. So that will be my submission.
Okay, thank you so much, Muka.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we've come to the end of our session this morning. And again, just thank you all for staying on and for participating, asking questions, and trying to get the most as you can out of you, the regulators who are here today. Again, we thank those, our funders who have made all of this possible, Comic Relief and Jersey Overseas Aid for their support to the FinTech4U Accelerator Programme. Also, would really like to thank BongHive Innovation Hub for their partnership and collaboration in helping us at UNCDF run and manage the program. And I think I'll draw the program to a close here. Yes, thank you all very much for participating and for being involved, and thank you all to our panelists as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Samantha, did you have any last comments?
Good. Thank you. Great.
No last comments from me, just reiterating thanks, as you've said.
Great. Thank you all. Enjoy the day, keep warm, and stay safe.